Hello everyone, thanks for joining me. This is Crystal with She Sews. Today I'm going to walk you through the thinning process. I just wanted to show you my seedlings because I'm in the process of thinning them out. So basically the thinning process is when the seedlings are tall enough and mature enough to be separated, or basically the process is taking 2 down to 1 or 3 down to 1. Usually in each container you plant 2 to 3 seeds, and you can see I was a little overzealous. Some of my containers have 3 or 4 plants, which is way too many per cell. What we need to do is reduce each container to 1 plant each, so that one plant can grow and thrive and mature and be ready for the hardening off process, which is when we carefully, over a week or two, transplant it outdoors. So as we look through my seedlings, I just want to briefly show you how I thin them out. There are a couple of different processes. You can use scissors and cut at the soil line, or you can use your fingertips, your fingernail, and just clip the plant that you will not keep. Another option is you can, if you have the space, you can remove one of the plants and put it in a container of its own, and then you'll have 2 plants. Okay, so I'll show you how I do this as we go along. Since we're trying to apply gardening spirit to the spiritual walk, I think it's important to consider times in our lives and just think about times in our lives when maybe God has removed relationships or situations, places from our lives for our betterment. When you think about these seeds, if you keep 2 or 3 seeds in a cell, they're going to compete for nutrients, for light, for water. So actually by removing the seedlings and leaving that 1 plant per cell, you're actually setting that plant up for success. And I think there are times where we can consider in our own lives when God has done this for us. Sometimes things are moved, sometimes we are moved or removed from places or people, and it's for our betterment. So I like to think of it that way. You can see here I'm using my fingertips to remove some of these plants, and actually these are pretty small, but under my grow light I'm running out of room. And what ends up happening, because my seedlings, some of them were so close together, the leaves were blocking other plants from receiving the sunlight. You can see how close these are together. They're a little too close together to separate, so I had to just go ahead and remove some. And these are bell peppers and mini bell peppers from Baker Creek. The stems are so thin and the root systems are so fragile at this point because they're so close together. I just had to get rid of some. And you can see that because the stems were so thin, you could do that with your fingernail pretty easily. Just walk you through a couple more. These are the serrano pepper plants. Able just to clip those with my finger. And again, these are still pretty small. You could wait till they get a little taller and have a 2 true set of leaves, but I went ahead and thinned mine early because everything was just getting crowded under my grow lights. So if you look at the basil, I use scissors for these because they're a little bit more difficult to remove with your fingernail, and I actually do not have really long fingernails. Banana peppers, those are too thin. I didn't want to risk ruining the root system there as well. But if you have 2 that are far enough apart, you can actually just separate them and transplant into another container. And I'll show you that at the end of this video. Using scissors, you want to cut at the soil line. some people will leave the plant that was clipped in the tray, in the container, and basically when it dies, it releases the nutrients for the other plant to use. Some people will just, throw these in their compost. You can see I'm using the scissors to clip here as well. Okay, next we're going to be thinning out my tomatoes, and you'll see that my tomatoes, the story I'm going to tell you is I was overzealous. I planted so many. I was impatient and they took too long to grow, and so I added more seeds, and then what do you know, they all ended up growing. So lesson learned, be patient, take your time. It'll sprout eventually. And so you can see some of them are leaning because they were so crowded. And what I did is clipped the smallest ones at the soil line so that one per cell can thrive and be transplanted outside later. A lot of these were too close together to salvage. And here you go. Thinned out tomatoes, cherry and Roma tomatoes. Here's a cherry tomato. Okay, so some of you might be wondering, what if I want to keep the seedling and not, get rid of it? I want to actually keep it and transplant it. That's also an option. So here's an example of 2 Roma tomatoes in the same container, and you can see the little fuzzy parts on the tomato. Those actually can grow as roots. And so what you want to do, you make sure the soil's pretty damp, and they're far enough apart where you can actually take one out without disturbing the root system of the other. So what you would do if you had room for this and you had more containers or another place to put it, is you could take a couple of fingers, and I'm going to show you as I do this. You just take your finger and take the whole system out, okay? And you can see I was able to take all of that out without damaging this one. And then if I had another container, I would have a little hole ready, and you just put that in there and put the soil around it, water it, put it under a light source, and there you go. So this right here could actually be planted in another cup. Water it, and now you have 2. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for taking the time to share in the learning experience of thinning plants and transplanting plants. I pray that as we remember and try to parallel gardening with our spiritual walk, I pray that we are able to trust His process, and don't forget to sow the seed. Thanks so much. Bye.